Welcome to Beyond Motion, the podcast where we explore human performance and dive into the latest innovations, research, and stories shaping the field of biomechanics. Join us as we explore the intersection of technology, human movement, and optimization. I'm Lindsay, and I'm joined by my co-host, Zach.
Hello.
We are continuing on with our biomechanics stories sort of run here. Last week, or last month, however often we release these, talked about biomechanics in the courtroom. So I'm picking it up here, dialing it back to the 1980s, a time of big hair, bigger muscles, and the rise of sports science. But despite all that energy, biomechanics didn't really break into elite sports the same way we thought it would.
This is going to be fun. I'm exciting. I was not born in the 80s, but it's something about that time period. You just have a soft spot in your heart for it. I think the big hair, crazy music and all the things that were going on culturally. It's such a fun time. But yeah, I'm curious to hear these stories and learn, what held it back. Was it the technology? Was it the culture? Or something else entirely different. So let's dig
Yeah,
in.
cool. Yeah, it feels a little nostalgic. I wasn't born in the 80s either, but
Yeah.
something about it just kind of takes
Yeah.
you back.
It takes you back. Takes you back to the 80s.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So picture this. It's 1983. You walk into a biomechanics lab, and there are force plates bolted into the floor, EMG cables tangled everywhere, and a reel-to-reel high-speed camera grinding away in the corner. You've got researchers excitedly plotting stick figures on graph paper to show how knees move during a jump. The lab smells faintly of solder and sweat. And if you're lucky, someone's just printed a free body diagram of ground reaction forces. Um, Honestly, not really that much different than
Yeah.
today's labs in a lot of
No,
ways,
throw
but
in a computer and a laptop and
yeah,
you're
exactly.
right there.
The computers are smaller, less EMG cables though.
Yeah.
But anyway, painting the picture. So this was the golden era of biomechanics research. Studies were rolling out on jump mechanics, ACL injury risk, and overhead throwing, all pointing to actionable insights that could have revolutionized training and rehab. But none of it really made its way onto the field at that time. So, gonna be talking about a few reasons why that is and just kind of continue telling stories in that era.
Cool.
So, it was 1983, and deep inside the biomechanics lab at the University of Oregon, a small group of researchers was onto something big. They had meticulously been tracking female athletes as they landed from single leg jumps, measuring every ground reaction force, plotting all the muscle activation spikes, slowly connecting the dots between the movement that was happening and the injury mechanism. So each trial painted a very similar picture. The knee started caving inward upon landing, a telltale valgus collapse that happened in the blink of an eye. So the force plates didn't lie. The EMG traces confirmed it. It wasn't all just a fluke. It was a biomechanical pattern quietly setting the stage for ACL tears.
Hmm.
So the researchers knew what they were seeing. They published papers, they presented to rooms full of academics. They had uncovered a warning sign years before ACL injuries would really explode across women's sports. But outside the lab, kind of got crickets.
Nothing.
So there wasn't any digital platform to share the data, even though they were, talking to rooms full of other academics. No biomechanics app for coaches, no Instagram clip showing what to fix. The journals were read by other researchers, not strength coaches. So the information stayed right where it began, in the stacks of papers and lab archives. Meanwhile, out in the field, female athletes continued to train in the same way. Plyometric drills pushed them to jump higher and land harder, but no one was teaching them how to land safer, or maybe what could have caused that. Um, that injury mechanism. The tools to prevent injury were sitting in a filing cabinet, basically. The coaches never saw them. And so some of the most valuable early insights on ACL risk never made it to the people who could have made a difference. Not because the science was wrong, but just because the story never left the lab. Um, so here's another example. Have you heard of Dr. Gideon Ariel?
Yeah, the name sounds very familiar. I remember coming across his name and maybe some of his work like early on in my career at Naraxon. And I think at the time I was like, how do I sell this guy Naraxon equipment?
This guy.
Yeah.
So this guy, Dr. Gideon Ariel, is a true pioneer in computerized biomechanical analysis. So Ariel was an Israeli Olympian in shot put and discus before earning his PhD in biomechanics. So in the 1970s and 80s, he began applying computer-based analysis to athletic technique, which was revolutionary at the time. No one else was doing stuff like that. One of his most famous collaborations was with four-time Olympic gold medalist Al Erder. Erder was already considered past his prime when Ariel invited him into his biomechanics lab. And so he used high-speed video and custom software that he developed, and he broke down basically every element of Erder's throwing motion. Joint angles, velocity, timing, and pinpointed mechanical inefficiencies that even the athlete himself hadn't felt.
Yeah. How do you
Um,
feel those things, right?
no,
Sometimes impossible.
and things that you can't see with your eyes
Yeah.
either. So, kind of revolutionary stuff at the time. So Ariel took this information and introduced slight changes to Erder's foot positioning and release mechanics. And at the result, at age of 43, Erder threw a personal best, farther than any of his gold medal winning distances. And he credited Ariel's analysis with unlocking his untapped potential for his throw. But Ariel didn't stop there. He worked with other athletes from multiple Olympic sports, including swimming, gymnastics, and track and field, and also collaborated with the U.S. Olympic Committee and military researchers. But for all the success he had with athletes directly, Ariel often struggled to convince coaches and sports organizations to adopt his methods. So science was still kind of decades behind, right? Like even kind of going back to the first story about ACL injury and how that all stayed in the research lab, we have Dr. Ariel, who has this background in, more, he has a PhD in biomechanics for sure, but he was an Olympian. Like he is an athlete. He
Right.
has some of this context. And even he's failing to get people to pick up on the importance of doing this type of analysis and adopting his strategies. So his innovations actually extended far beyond elite athletes. He actually founded a company called Computerized Biomechanics Analysis, Inc. in 1963, and later Aerodynamics, Inc., creating systems to quantify human movement using Newtonian mechanics. And his team built the first sonic digitizer for rapidly converting 16 millimeter film into joint center data. And Ariel himself wrote the software to run those analyses on Dartmouth's computer systems. He once said in an interview, they trusted their eyes and tradition. I trusted the numbers, and the numbers didn't lie. They just scared people.
Yeah, that's the digitizer piece is now bringing something to mind. I remember seeing something about, and maybe it was like another interview or something, but I remember the talking point was that they would display the video on like a big projector screen on like a wall,
Yeah.
and then literally frame by frame, they would use this digitizer pen
Mm-hmm.
and they'd have to point from frame by frame every single joint center.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how long that took
I
for some
know.
of these things, even for something that was you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 second type of a clip, but
Yeah.
depending on how many frames per second there are, right? Like, I mean, you're spending a lot of time just to digitize this body. That's not even doing any of the math or anything else past that.
No,
It's just to get the model.
it's just step
Mm.
one. And so it's like how do you have the manpower to actually get behind something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine the feelings of productivity were probably
Yeah.
a little light from time to time, but
Yeah.
once you got to the end, I'm sure it was exciting, especially in like that type of example with the discus thrower and being able to use the science, use those methods to then help them achieve these goals that they otherwise didn't think were possible. But I'm just curious because it sounds like at least back then, like they were able to deliver some information and there were some of these analysis techniques. So were the biomechanists just overcomplicating things to where it was irrelevant? What do you think there?
I think it's just kind of the age old people weren't speaking the same
Mm,
language. Obviously, other factors which we'll discuss, like, money, who
yeah.
adopts it, things like that. But I think it's just that there's a guy over here saying, like, hey, I did a cool thing. And everyone's looking at how he did it and seeing, like, oh, you're digitizing 4 seconds of data in 4 hours. Like, how is this even practical?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The practicality piece for sure was maybe not there. And so there was not it didn't seem scalable, I bet,
Yeah.
to people. And so although it was cool, it just was kind of like lived in its own world and maybe reserved for like ultra special cases or something
Hmm.
like that, or for the people that did have the time. Who knows what the situation was with Erder where maybe kind of moonlighting in as this athlete still, like
Yeah.
at that point it probably wasn't his primary thing, like he was 43, but he's like, hey, I just want to see if I still got something in me, like
Yeah. It takes a special
I
person,
got
unique
time, let's
situation.
hang out, let's do
Let's hang
this.
out.
And let's see what happens. But
Yeah. And not everyone is Dr. Gideon Ariel. I mean,
no.
he has this unique background as a former Olympian, getting his PhD in biomechanics, and obviously had this passion and drive to make something work.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes that unique combination and situation to create something special.
Yeah,
Wasn't exactly like a major in college for something like that.
I was gonna say, I wonder, how many biomechanists there actually were, or even ones with PhDs, like at that time.
I
Like,
don't know. I saw
got
that
to
and
be a
I'm like,
handful.
could you even get a PhD in biomechanics back
Yeah,
then?
maybe in at Dartmouth. I
Yeah,
don't
maybe
know.
there. Yeah. But let's talk about some of the other challenges
Okay.
here. I want to talk a little bit about the tech itself.
Mm.
So in the 80s, we had some powerful tools, but they were far from field ready. High-speed video meant setting up cameras the size of small TVs.
Mm.
EMG required tape, gel, wires, and a lot of patience. And the software was not intuitive whatsoever. You often had to export raw numbers and write your own code just to get some basic readout. So biomechanics was kind of stuck in the lab because it required someone highly technical to be able to do all of these things.
Yeah.
And the people that, they were more or less creating this for the coaches of athletes needed results in real time. And researchers are sitting there giving them spreadsheets a week later. It's kind of a misalignment of purpose.
Yeah.
So, with that, let's get into another little story here. So, in the early 1980s, studios like the Biomechanics Lab at the University of Massachusetts Amherst were pioneering what would later become foundational techniques in sports movement analysis. So high-speed 16 millimeter film cameras, again, bulkier than small TVs, were mounted on tripods, often requiring two people to position correctly, and
Hmm.
the setup alone takes as long as the actual capture, probably more time than the
Oh, way
actual
more. Yeah,
capture.
like 10x.
Yeah. Before recording, researchers applied these little white markers to key joints and landmarks at the hip, knee, and ankle, designed to help the marker path be traceable frame by frame.
Mhm.
Something that is still used today in
Yeah.
traditional optical motion capture systems. Correct lighting, angle, and stability were critical, but once filming started, it was pretty unforgiving.
Mhm.
It was only a few seconds per trial, and it was one shot with no retakes.
Yeah, there's no digital film, right? So
No, it was all on 16 millimeter.
yeah.
So even though a lot of that probably sounds pretty familiar, like, oh yeah, we still put white markers on people today. The lighting and the importance of camera positioning is all still important,
Mhm.
but the possibility of just not even having any redos, man, pretty unforgiving
Yeah.
there.
And speaking from experience, you often need redos.
Yes, for sure. And then after the film was developed, which is typically off-site due to time and cost, students spent hours at a specially built digitizer pad, tracing every joint on every single frame of film, just like you said,
Yeah.
right? So that data became these stick figure animations, and people printed out these tables with joint angle curves, often rendered into these rudimentary dot matrix printers. So one of the architects of the system was at UMass, Dr. Stanley Plogenhof. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
Mhm.
A biomechanics professor who built film-sized tracing rigs with angled mirrors, glass tables, and manual tracing overlays. So he sort of pioneered this system that allowed for that sequential frame by frame digitizing and processing process via punched cards and mainframe programs, just to derive those joint positions, velocity, and accelerations of movement. But that system, kind of going back to Dr. Ariel, formed the basis for Ariel's earlier analog to digital workflows and computerized biomechanics analysis, which combined manual digitizing with computer automation
Mm.
to improve the throughput, even though it was pretty slow and error prone
Yeah.
still. So, I mean, it worked, sure, but it wasn't fast and it wasn't easy, and coaches couldn't use it, and athletes never saw it. So by the time the final report was ready, everyone had already moved on,
Yeah. The athlete may have already competed or yeah,
graduated,
right. Yeah, at that point. Yeah, that's
or
funny.
gotten injured.
Exactly.
So it just shows how labor intensive early biomechanics research truly was. There wasn't any instant playback, there wasn't any automated tracking, just this laborious handiwork that by the time they got anything usable, the person that they made it for was like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Thanks. That was
Yeah,
fun.
right.
So I guess here's a thought. So if what if the tech had been ready? Would coaches still have used it, or were they always going to resist that outside input?
I don't know. I think like we talk about it has to be this perfect storm of things to happen, but it also back then and even to some extent nowadays is still that, there's still a lot of pushback because
Hmm.
people always think they have the right opinion. Not every people, but
Sure.
people do.
Yeah.
Um, so I think back then in the 80s, there was sort of more of a culture around coaching where they probably were a little bit more, uh, wanting to believe that they had the right way of doing things.
Hmm.
So I think just the culture around that and the inability to speak the same language as the researchers is probably the main driver there. But I think it just takes more people to be willing to sort of pioneer that, right? We had
Yeah.
Dr. Ariel, but like who else
Right.
really was out there at that point in time to go communicate to their peers in the coaching world and say, hey, this is
It
important.
is. Yeah. It's like you needed the history of all these sort of proven situations where
Hmm.
data informed coaching mattered,
Yeah.
and actually produced results on the field or off the field, let's say, in terms of injury recovery or rehabilitation.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I agree. It's like even if the technology was, let's just say, miraculously like where it is today or something,
Yeah.
the rest of those pieces weren't ready. And
Right.
so, like, it would have taken a big risk, let's say, from one of these coaches to be like, yep, this is what I'm doing. I'm using this information to drive my player performance or something. And
Yeah.
people will be like, you're crazy and
Yeah.
you're wasting a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
uh Good luck, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Uh
And
but
maybe we don't even hear about some of those stories. Maybe there were a
sure.
few people that took those risks and it was like it quietly was never spoken of again after many people said
Mhm.
this is too expensive and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So,
No, but I think that's a great point. And you kind of alluded to it earlier too about just the language barrier,
mhm.
Um, and that was two very distinctly different people,
Yeah, you got a
the scientists
researcher.
and the coach, like
Yeah.
couldn't be more different probably in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Um, so it kind of brings us into more of a discussion around the culture. So again, a lot of the coaches in the 80s were ex-athletes.
Hmm.
Their value came from experience, from gut instinct, and from time-tested routines. So it's kind of a boys' club of like
Sure.
everyone's sharing this information. They're all they've moved in the same ways as the other athletes have, so they have that experience to bring to the table.
Yeah.
But when a lab coat showed up with a bunch of graphs claiming to optimize performance, it just didn't really land.
I love that image of like thinking about like this, everyone's wearing normal clothes or even like the
Yeah,
uniform, and then just like the scientist has to show up in a
with his
in a
goofy
lab. Yeah,
glasses.
there's a lab coat. Like that's so funny. But
Hmm.
it feels like that is exactly how it went down.
Yeah. So I was often seen as a challenge to authority. And to be fair, some of the scientists, again, didn't exactly speak the same language as the
Yep.
sport. So they were publishing in niche journals and not talking at coaching clinics because, again, like just missed connection after missed connection.
Yeah.
So there was really no translation layer.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no Rosetta Stone.
no, not yet. So with that in mind, let's get into another little story about those miscommunications. So back in the mid 1980s, biomechanics labs at major universities like Penn State were experimenting with high-speed film and force plate systems to analyze sprint and hurdle mechanics. These were the early days of kinematics analysis. Again, on that 16 millimeter film, manual digitization, hours of tracing joint positions. But they also had the force plates, which give really good connect data. And there was a growing interest even then in the relationship between stride length, contact time, and muscle strain risk, particularly in events like the 110-meter hurdles. So by the mid 80s, researchers had begun to observe something biomechanically significant in elite hurdlers, which is overstriding in the approach to the first hurdle. A longer than optimal third step, usually that last contact before takeoff, was shown to increase ground reaction time and delay swing phase timing. And it also placed elevated eccentric load on the hamstrings, especially the biceps femoris, as the leg decelerated before liftoff. So while this wasn't always published in mainstream coaching literature, those things in the biomechanics field were still being talked about back then.
Mhm.
The increased force demand on the hamstrings combined with poor rhythm between steps set up a pretty clear risk pathway for injury. And there's plenty of data to back that up. So in the 2020 review, Strength and Conditioning Journal, it confirmed that many researchers had been observing that for decades. But it also confirmed that excessive stride length and delayed foot clearance are strongly linked to hamstring strain injuries. So there are a couple of other journals that, kind of confirm this, but it's all stuff that's people knew about it to some extent. But again, it was like a boys' club. Like they were maybe talking about it, but didn't really know how to understand
Sure, or is
what was
like
happening.
written off
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm sure as well.
Yeah. So imagine this. A biomechanics team spends 2 weeks capturing and analyzing the approach phase of a university's top hurdler. The data shows textbook overstriding and elevated force absorption in the lead leg. So they prepare so they prepare a report, highlight the warning signs, and hand it off to the coaching staff.
Hmm.
But the coach just shrugs and he's like, this kid just broke a world record. Why did we change what's working? So 2 meets later, the athlete pulls up with a hamstring strain during prelims, and it's a grade 2 tear. Season's over. So that story wasn't pulled from a specific report, sure, but it reflects a pattern that's been echoed across biomechanics labs for decades. The data was there, but it wasn't always heard, and too often it just wasn't understood by the people who needed it the most.
It's interesting. And, again, kind of has me wondering, like, would the use or application of biomechanics, would it have taken off earlier if the researchers just spent more time in those coaches' clinics or more time watching practice, uh, communicating, developing those relationships with the coaches, just to have a better understanding of like, okay, what's the value that this information is bringing, and how can I create that bridge?
Yeah. Because
Uh,
by the time they're walking in there, there's no relationship. There's no like, here's how I can help you, and here's what I'm
well,
trying to do.
yeah, and I imagine that the introductions in the first place, came from this point of like, I want to do this data collection because I want to publish this paper,
Right.
not necessarily because I want to help facilitate like, the best strength and conditioning program for you or prevent injuries or something like that. I'm
For
sure
sure.
those points were noted as well, but like the priority for the researcher was to do the research. And so maybe like just the initial interaction or purpose of the conversation wasn't really aligned between the two people.
Yeah.
So, but I guess it's, also brings to the point too of being like, well, is it the scientist's job to learn how to be the coach, or is it the coach's job to learn how to read the data?
Yeah.
Are they one and the same?
Yeah.
Probably depends on who you ask.
I think that's absolutely still a relevant
Yeah.
question nowadays because we have obviously the technology is a lot more practical in many ways, but there's still challenges with coaches and therapists and these people out applying this information, really understanding it.
Hmm.
So I don't know what the answer is there. I mean, obviously, there are now whole jobs for like biomechanists on sports teams
Yeah.
and organizations that have the money for additional staff, where like that person kind of has the ability to communicate to all parties and bring things together. But just
Hmm.
back then, that wasn't a thing at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings to mind one of our previous guests, Ethan,
Hmm.
when he was talking about how like 99% of the time, like the coach's gut is right. And
Yeah,
he's like, all we're doing is just like showing them numbers that verify that. And he's like, and then there's that 1% where, maybe the information, the data says something different to what their gut feeling is, but we can add more support to say like, okay, why should we look at this? Why should we look at the data versus, just go with your gut instinct kind of a thing. So,
right.
um, but I think even in his career, I think he's learned to take that approach of being like, this is your world. I'm just here to support you in what you're
Right.
doing, whether that's verifying a decision, giving you a second opinion, whatever it is. But it's not that the information is to take over and be the end all be all. It's just that it's supporting information to help maybe make a little bit more of an informed decision one way or another.
Yeah. And I think that was certainly lost in translation behind, as you mentioned, the researcher coming in and saying, like, here's an article that I want to write to publish
Hmm.
in this journal. Coach is like, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
But it's also like Ethan talked a lot about, like, he just kind of became that guy who can talk to any of those people
Hmm.
on his team, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's some of the other biomechanists and stuff like that. It's just learning how to speak a language that other people are going to pick
Mhm.
up on.
Yeah. Yeah, only took decades to, figure that out from
Yeah.
from within these communities, right?
Yeah. All seems really silly when you look back on it, but hey, we're making progress
Yeah,
one
hindsight's
way or another.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another major barrier was money.
Yes, always.
Always kind
Still
of the
is.
kicker.
Yeah.
So in the 80s, pro sports didn't have performance science budgets, period. A training staff might consist of one or two people. And when push came to shove, money went to players and gear, not lab
Yep.
equipment. So biomechanics was kind of seen as this luxury toy to some extent. Without a clear and immediate performance return on investment, it was nearly impossible to justify.
Yeah, I mean, there weren't TV contracts the way that there are
No.
today. I mean, the amount of money coming into these leagues was a fraction of what it is today. I mean, there's guys in basketball and baseball whose entire contracts are probably more than the revenue that the leagues were making
Oh, yeah.
in the
Easily.
80s, right? So,
Yeah.
uh it makes sense that they were like, what do you mean? Like, we're not gonna spend whatever tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000 plus on
Yeah.
this equipment.
And additional staff to
In
like
addition, yeah,
use it and try to figure out what's going on.
to then get reports like a week later.
Yeah. They just had these
Like,
two guys on the training staff that are
yeah,
doing their best.
yeah, exactly. Just, holding on a whim and a prayer, right?
Yeah,
Just like hoping
exactly.
that everything worked out well.
Yep. And their job is obviously all based around whether the team does well that season. And
Mhm.
yeah, still things that happen, but a
Yeah.
lot more money in it for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of what we've been talking about is, it's kind of easy to pin the fact that biomechanics didn't really catch on in the 1980s as like people didn't understand it, which is true. That skepticism played a role, but often the bigger issue was money.
Right.
So picture this. It's 1987, and biomechanics labs like the newly formed American Sports Medicine Institute were beginning to break ground on 3D pitching analysis. And at the same time, researchers at local universities are cobbling together motion capture systems with reflective markers, high speed cameras, and custom code. And they're not really trying to sell anything yet. They just want to access real world athletes to sort of prove their concept out
Yeah.
there. So one young professor walks into the front office of a double A team in the Midwest. He's not really pitching a player, he's pitching biomechanics. Says we can film your pitchers, we can model their throwing mechanics in 3D, we can flag risk factors for injury, and he's offered to do it for free. No equipment costs, no consulting fee, just permission to test it out in the bullpen. So the general manager he's talking to starts explaining like we need gloves, bats, and a new batting cage net, not stick figure cartoons of how a guy throws.
So patronizing.
Yeah, so patronizing. But again, like he's offering this free of cost, but there's still this like, what are you selling me?
Right.
Right? There's
There's always a catch.
there's
Yeah.
always a catch. So even if the GM had been more open-minded, the reality is that most minor league teams and even many of the major league teams back then were operating on these shoestring budgets in the 80s. So the idea of dedicating time, space, or staff to an experimental system with no proven game day impacts, like that's the end of a conversation. So, I mean, back then, the average salary for a minor league trainer barely covered the basics, and front offices are busy fighting for dollars to replace turf, buy gear, cover road trips, and not fund biomechanics experiments. So, even though this individual is offering, like, hey, we can just film your pictures, it's like, okay, this still takes time. This still does take equipment. It's like they just don't have any of that or any reason to believe that it's going to result in any actionable like game day wins.
Right. Yeah. So what do you do when the science is free, but the attention is too expensive?
Kind of interesting thought, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, time is money, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. Time is money. So it's like, I don't know what the answer is to that. Again, better communication, more people out there explaining that it's useful, but
well, I think
yeah,
it just, yeah, it was like there was no proven result, proven impact, let's say, right?
yeah,
So it had to take somebody though to want to take that risk and
yeah.
say,
I
let's
mean, at the
figure it
end of
out.
the
How can
day,
this, deliver some impact?
yeah,
And that's clearly, at this point, what ball got rolling. And maybe it was the group at ASMI that kickstarted all of that too.
yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a sales pitch. You need some kind of return on
Hmm.
investment proof, right?
Yeah.
And so this guy's walking around saying, like, I want to analyze your players, but it's like, what's in it for the GM, right?
Hmm.
But that professor walked out of the building with his gear still packed. And a few years later, teams like the Oakland A's did begin integrating biomechanics into their development pipeline. Dr. Glenn Fleissig and his team at ASMI became leaders in identifying UCL risk and factors optimizing throwing mechanics.
Hmm.
So it all happened regardless. And obviously, we've talked about baseball being one of the main earlier adopters of biomechanics compared to many other sports. But just in the 1980s, the infrastructure just still wasn't
Wasn't there.
there. There's no money for extra analysis, no money for support staff, no room in the budget or the mindset. So in the end, those early offers were just left on the table, not because the science was wrong, but because there wasn't enough in the bank to believe in it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess to play on our previous question, but it's like if one team made it work, that one person took that risk and was able to prove the value, the impact. I wonder if it would have sparked a biomechanics arms race, where these organizations rather, would want to make investments in things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, is that kind of what happened to some extent? Like it did just have to start with one team,
Yeah, 100%.
but the
Yeah.
money was a part of it, right? I mean, that team had to, I'm I didn't really look into this, but curious to talk more about it. But I think by the time technology was being adopted for biomechanics, like those big TV contracts and stuff were a thing, right?
Right.
Like there
Yeah.
was more money in the bank to support that kind of thing.
Definitely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean through the 80s, like the NBA kind of turned over with uh the players and the types of contracts that they were getting, and then through into the 90s, that was like kind of the golden era of when, really sports broadcasting and
Right.
all of that really took off, right? All these
Hmm.
sports became global sports. And so yeah, the revenues were there.
Yeah.
And you know, I think on my side, I don't know if even if just one team made it work, like would that have sparked an arms race? I really don't think so. I think that there
Yeah.
still needed to be that time where it like proved out across the board that
Hmm.
there was value here.
Yeah.
And even today, I mean, like you're seeing, these committees or these groups that are still kind of debating on like, well, what data is actually important? What's valuable here?
Oh yeah.
What are the metrics that we want to focus on? What's going to give us that edge, or what's going to be that indicator, that, true red flag of
Yeah.
injury risk? And
Everyone's looking for that golden nugget because
yes,
biomechanics is just so
yeah,
complicated that it's like someone's trying to find a way to simplify it.
yeah, yeah. So I'd say even today, like there's still those, the money thing is, of course, always going to be in question. I mean, people are, uh, maybe it's a combination of like the cost
Yeah.
of attention plus the cost of actual equipment and whatnot. But um, yeah, there's still a lot to be proved out. I think we're just at a point now where the technology is accessible, it's pretty.
It's prettier,
Yeah,
yeah. Less
there's
wires everywhere.
right. Yeah, the communication lines are more open. I think there's been enough support to say that like, yeah, there's value in data,
Yeah.
and data informed decision making, but it's just a matter of still figuring out like what's the best data,
Yeah.
which is such a funny question, but
Yeah. I mean,
it is the question.
that's where we're at now,
Yeah.
right? It's like that things change, right? Tech has evolved.
Hmm.
Everything's becoming way user friendly, and also the coaches see actual value in this collaboration so that
Yep.
those lines are open. And so we've been seeing teams building more of these high performance departments and integrating biomechanical data into not just performance, but rehab and return to play protocols,
Hmm.
or even player scouting,
Yeah.
right? So, but all that was built on the foundation laid by researchers in the 80s.
Yeah, 100%.
Someone dusted off those files in the filing cabinet one day and,
Said,
decided it
look at
was
this,
worth
it's a
it.
gold mine.
Look at this guy in a lab coat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the lab coats have changed these
That's
days.
right.
Yeah, they're now golf polos.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to talk about the NBA a little bit more.
Okay.
So in the early days of the NBA, a player coming back from injury was usually cleared by just one person, and it
Mm.
was the team trainer.
Okay.
So if the ankle looked good, the swelling was down, the player said, I feel fine. That was it. Back to the court. Rehab was based on experience and instinct, and objective data rarely a part of the equation.
Mm.
So fast forward to 2020, the Toronto Raptors had just finished a morning shoot around in a quiet room adjacent to the court. A returning player was hooked up to wearable sensors, EMGs, IMU sensors, and those devices were tracking joint angles, muscle activation patterns, and symmetry as you went through these landing drills and cutting maneuvers. A few years earlier, a cleared return might have meant pain-free jogging
Mm.
and a handshake. But now the system flagged subtle imbalances. So one leg is absorbing more force, one glute's firing too late.
Mm.
Uh, Nothing the naked eye would catch, certainly, but enough to delay a full return by another week. So the data didn't just confirm what the athlete felt, it told the whole story of how the body was compensating. So kind of using this more recent story to explain like why it's how it's useful to delay things like return to sport and why that's becoming more of a key a key thing that people are looking to this biomechanics technology for is not just like performance, but this how do we know when an athlete can go back to doing their sport?
Right.
What does that mean? Um, so behind the scenes here, it's not just a trainer calling the shots anymore. There's a full high performance team.
Hmm.
There's a sports scientist who's analyzing all the numbers. There's a biomechanist interpreting the joint kinematics. There's a strength coach modifying the rehab plan. And there's a coach getting a simple answer, which is not yet.
Yeah.
So there's just way more people, way more support staff involved with these decisions, as we've talked about with Ethan, right? It's like this whole team gets to sort of make this informed decision together,
Right.
not just the trainer who's like, that doesn't look swollen anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Get back out there.
Yeah. We'll get you on more ice after you're done practicing
Right,
or playing in the game.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what made this possible wasn't just the new tech, it was actually just old insight finally put into action. So just kind of funny that I feel like every time we paint a picture of what the tech looks like, it's like not really that different
No.
from what's available nowadays. It's just that, like you said, it's prettier, it's smaller, there are less wires, fewer wires, there
More computing power.
more computing power, no
Yeah.
16 millimeter film.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you can do redos.
yeah, you could do redos, you could press the rewind button. But in the 1980s, researchers had already documented these post-injury gait asymmetries and compensation patterns. They plotted all of these joint angles and EMG activation signals and warned that visual assessments alone missed key recovery markers. But back then, the work just was ignored or misunderstood.
Mhm.
So now that same science is powering the decisions behind $1 million athletes, which is cool. So, what started as academic theory in a dusty lab has become one of the most trusted tools in pro sports. Biomechanics has finally made its way onto the court.
Way to go. Way to go, biomechanics. You did it.
Yeah, way to go,
Uh,
biomechanics, buddy.
um, yeah, it's interesting. And definitely clear now, right? That it's for sure the most exciting forefront of sports and is the science component of it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like there's so much analysis that goes into the players, the results of the game. I mean, like it's end to end, like you said, it's from recruiting, it's in return to play, it's in the
yeah.
training, it's in the in-game performance metrics. Like
Hmm.
nothing is not being analyzed, like
Yeah.
they're not leaving any stone unturned. But so I wonder, does it feel like we're finally honoring that early work, or is it just rewriting history to make it look like we had it all figured out right from the start?
I think there's a lot of fake it till you make it going
Sure,
on for
yeah.
sure. It feels like, it's hard to say. It's not like every conversation you have biomechanics about biomechanics is people bring up like, oh man, if only we'd done this
Yeah,
40
I
years
knew, I
ago.
knew it.
I
I knew
knew
we
it
should have
40
done
years
that. Yeah.
ago. So I don't think those claims are being said.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's any there's any honoring from that standpoint.
Hmm.
But I mean, just kind of digging into it, it's like that it's clear that those things were there, and
Yeah.
it feels a little bit more clear now after looking into it and chatting about it, like why those things just were more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for sure there's at least from like the folks that are the scientists that are making it into these organizations, like there's a clear reverence for the past and the people that sort of laid the foundation. Usually they can connect themselves through their advisors who were then, advised by these like
Yes,
pioneers of this space, right? So there's these,
definitely.
1 or maybe 2 degrees of separation from,
Yeah.
these people who were creating these keystone studies back then. And even in the published literature today or in the presentations that are being given around the world every single day, there's for sure reference to the the original people that were coming up with these ideas and these concepts. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at any research article that's published about any of these sort of sports science concepts, and somewhere in there is a reference to, whatever some study that was done in 1986 or
Oh yeah.
1987 or whatever. Like it has to be, right? Because it's kind
Yeah.
of the source material for a lot of
Right.
what's creating these questions, these hypotheses in the first place.
For sure. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, it is honoring that work and just extending it. And as we've seen, I mean, it's becoming more relevant just because people are picking it up, coaches are
Hmm.
picking it up. So,
Yeah.
interesting to see. I'll be interested to continue to see where the NBA takes their technical analysis too.
Yeah, they got that big initiative that they
Yeah.
are deploying, I think, over the next couple years. So, yeah, be cool to see kind of what kind of impact that actually has, and how does that shape the next 30 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I know that we have some customers or individuals that we talk with who are consulting for them. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of interesting to hear what the latest things are, or, whether there's any progress being made in terms of finding that golden nugget. So I guess we'll have to find out.
Yep. Hopefully we're the first to find out too.
Yeah, right. So next time you see a team using high-speed cameras or wireless EMG, remember, didn't happen overnight.
Sure didn't.
Took decades of grinding, failing, and refining.
Yep. Well, thanks. This was a fun deep dive into this history. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to keep going with this kind of format too,
yeah,
telling each other some stories
I
and
know.
about different points of how biomechanics has been used in history or in, I guess, current times as well, but just, the applications of it, and dig into some of the different stories that shape the use of biomechanics in the real world.
For sure. I feel like I learn a lot with these. I think it's just kind of a fun way to put a spin on
Yeah,
biomechanics.
100%.
So until next time, keep asking questions, keep moving smart. Follow us on social media,
Yep.
all the Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yep. At Naraxon USA,
There you
Beyond
go.
Motion. That's it.
That's it.
See you next time.
See you next time.